Now, this is a year where potentially President Xi Jinping could be coming to India twice over, once for the SCO summit in mid-June, then potentially in September. I want your thoughts, Foreign Minister, on India's most important relationship with the neighbor across the Himalayas. What's your reading of the current state of play with China, given the continuing confrontation in the Depsang and Demchok sectors of the line of actual control?
You know, this is a very, I would say, challenging and abnormal phase in our ties with China. Why I say that is because from 1988, when Rajiv Gandhi went there, till 2020, the understanding was that peace and tranquility on the border would be maintained. We had two agreements not to bring large forces to the border. It was a very specific set of understandings. There were even protocols on what happens when army patrols meet each other, etc. Now, in 2020, the Chinese violated that. And they violated that, and the consequences of that we saw in Galwan and in other areas as well. Now, we have deployed our troops, we have stood our ground, and the situation, to my mind, still remains very fragile because there are places where our deployments are very close up and, you know, in military assessment, actually, therefore, quite dangerous. Now, we have made substantial progress when it comes to disengagement in many areas. There are still some areas where we have ongoing discussions. So they will, you know, it's a painstaking job. We will do that. Now, we have made it very clear to the Chinese that we cannot have a breach of peace and tranquility. You can't violate agreements and then want the rest of the relationship to continue as though nothing happened. That's just not tenable. So my most recent encounter in this regard was with the new Foreign Minister, Chingang, in fact, when the Foreign Ministers' G20 meeting took place. We had a long discussion about it. In September 2020, Wang Yi and I had an in-principle agreement how we're going to resolve it. So the Chinese have to deliver on what was agreed to. And they have struggled with that. Why? Well, that's a question you need to ask them. You know, I can't answer it because for me it's very clear-cut. Until these problems are sorted out, we will not return to a normal relationship. I want to make that very, very clear.
Your opponents say that you're not being totally honest about the extent of incursion, that areas where the Indian Army used to patrol previously have been denied, landmass in excess of 1,000 square kilometers being spoken of. They're saying this is a daylight robbery of our land. The PLA has intruded into our country. Dr. Jaishankar is not telling the people the truth.
These are the same opponents who said, let's leave the border undeveloped so that the Chinese can't come? Or if they come in, they can't come in so fast? These are the same opponents? Okay. Now, let's look at the reality. Look, the reality is wherever an attempt has been made to change the status quo, the Indian Army has deployed and countered. Now, it is because of that there has been face-offs and standoffs, and on some occasions clashes and loss of lives. If we had done nothing, then Galwan wouldn't have happened. Then, you know, what you saw in December at Yangtze in Arunachal wouldn't have happened. So the fact that, you know, there have been counter deployments is not disputed by anybody unless you are an opponent. Okay? So in terms of what is it you are patrolling, yes, there are certain places where we have is something which Rajnath Ji, the defense minister, has spoken about in Parliament, that you have mutually agreed areas of temporary non-patrolling in order to facilitate disengagement. So if there are places I cannot patrol, there are places the Chinese also cannot patrol. Now, so this is something which has been worked out in certain areas where the deployments were very, very close up. But do remember also, this is quite different from what used to happen before. Because if you looked at our history, you know, people forget in Barahoti in the 1950s, in 1958, we unilaterally decided on a demilitarized zone. They didn't reciprocate. In the 1970s, there are areas we chose not to patrol, unilaterally. Even when Sumdurongchu, Wangdung was resolved, we first came down. This government is very different. There's nothing unilateral. You know, if we have today taken on some I would say, commitment, that commitment is matched by an equal commitment based on the principle of equal and mutual security on the Chinese side. So, look, opponents will play this game because the very people who actually neglected the border, you know the border infrastructure budget till 2014 was below 4,000 crores. Today it's almost 15,000 crores. You look at road building, you know, the pace of road building has doubled or tripled. Tunneling has tripled. So the people who are today making a noise are people, I mean, and you should look at the record.
Speaking of opponents...
No, hang on.
Oh, yes.
In 2013, I was ambassador in China, okay? You remember there was, I think I spoke to you at that time, there was a Chinese incursion in Depsang. Do you remember what the foreign minister of the day said then? He said, this is acne on the face of a beautiful relationship, and therefore we should not worry about it. So now you're telling me these people have suddenly discovered what's the importance of the border? I mean, come on.